Eric, I want to drill down, if we can, on the due diligence stuff. This might come out as naive, and forgive me if it does, but are we now at the point where privacy and data security due diligence should and is baked into standard practice for every corporate deal, or is it more patchy at the end of the day?
I think at this point, cybersecurity due diligence should be baked into most M&A deals. It is often is not. I think we are seeing at Strauss Friedberg an uptick in law firms and private equity firms wanting technical assessments done to see whether there are vulnerabilities to the digital crown jewels. And that purpose of those assessments is to figure out, can the digital crown jewels be hacked? Does the to-be acquired company actually own its intellectual property? Does the source code, if that's the digital crown jewel, actually belong to the to-be acquired company, or is it stolen from elsewhere? Or is it maintainable, i.e. post-closing, if all of the developers are gone, can the new merged company actually put out new revisions, understand what code it has, patch the code, etc.? If the answer to that is no, you may have to go through significant expense to bring that code up to spec, and that kind of identification of an issue should be priced into the due diligence and priced into the deal.
Eric, I think you actually hit on one of the key issues a lot of our clients face, which is doing a cost-benefit analysis of the amount of due diligence to put in. Because you're exactly right, a lot of clients don't want to spend a lot of money doing this kind of due diligence if they're not actually going to enter into the acquisition agreement. On the other hand, if you do it after closing, it may be too late. And I suspect that's one of the things that you're working on a lot, is trying to provide counsel as to what is the right level of due diligence.
That's right, and it's not that hard, because what you're really looking for is sort of big structural problems. So let's say it's a payment card processor. You're really looking at some of the most fundamental questions given the threat landscape. So for payment card processors, the issue is, can credit card informations be scraped out of memory? That's been the exploit on all the big PCI breaches. For oil and gas, the issue is, structurally, are the industrial control systems there secure? Are they wildly insecure? Or for hospital networks and other kinds of healthcare industries, as you mentioned, personally identifying health information, if it's hacked, can be enormously damaging post-closing. So the question is, what is the level of maturity of this company? Is it at the very beginning of cyber maturity, or is it advanced cyber maturity? And it would only take a couple of days to a week of due diligence to answer these big structural questions. How to fix them is more expensive, but identifying them in advance of a deal is not that expensive.
I think you raise a really good point in that it is critical to have privacy and data security built into the checklist, the due diligence checklist. And it's really only in the last few years that we've seen that built in. And we've been hired quite frequently now in the last few years as special privacy and data security counsel. And the kinds of activities that we conduct, as you said, it can be done rather quickly to understand the broad landscape. I have one private equity client who says, I need to ask one question, and that is, do you have a specific individual responsible for privacy and responsible for data security? And if the company does not, that's an immediate alarm bell to say, you're not sufficiently focused on this. But I find that when we do an interview, or a series of interviews over the course of a couple of hours of a target company, you can ferret out pretty quickly which companies are sophisticated. Doesn't mean they're fully in compliance, but they're sufficiently sophisticated so that you can feel confident that you're buying a company that's going to be on the right path, or highly unsophisticated. And Eric, as you said, the data may not even belong to them appropriately. There may be some issues such that you can't right the ship. And post-closing, there's not even a way of putting the high priority items at the top to fix them. We also have, on a number of occasions, as you pointed out, tried to fix issues before closing, so that we might say, fix your privacy policies now. We certainly want to right the ship, if we can, with regulators if they're particularly irritated with a company, so that that doesn't become a big liability later.
Now, Lisa, if you then put yourself in the shoes of the potential company being acquired, you will find some limitations on the extent to which you're going to let the acquirer come in and kick the tires. I mean, like in Europe, you've got certain restrictions that you can say, no, you can't do that, right?
Absolutely. And of course, we understand that due diligence can be constrained. It can be constrained by the appetite of the target for significant questions. It can also be constrained, of course, by timing requirements. So that's when we kick it over to you guys to help us craft the reps and warranties and the deal documents, the exceptions schedule, and also the indemnities and the holdbacks.
I mean, one thing that's good about this area is you don't have to make it up as you go, because there's increasingly, for better or for worse, cybersecurity standards that most companies are having to comply with. So if you are a regulated company, if you're a Wall Street company or a Wall Street back-end company, you've got Reg SCI, you've got a NIST standard, you've got FFIEC. Typically, most companies will have some analysis on how compliant they are with that regulatory scheme. And I find that a big driver of cost in the M&A due diligence area, because if a company is not compliant with the regulatory scheme that it is subject to, the cost of fixing that post-closing can be enormous. So that is a sort of high-level issue that you can flag in due diligence. It isn't that intrusive, but it can drive a lot of cost and inform risk as the acquirer goes into the transaction.
I would also add on to that the fact of a breach is not fatal. The question is, how well did the company manage that breach? Did they know what they were doing? Did they manage the breach to mitigate risk going forward?
Lisa, I have a question. In this day and age, if the target told you they had never suffered a breach, would that be a red flag?
That is a big red flag. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the right point, Steve. The vast majority of companies have suffered some sort of information privacy or security issue. And the question in my mind is, did they have the right team in place? Did they have an incident response plan that was sufficiently mature so that they handled it in a reasonably smooth manner? And did they irritate enough of their clients so that there would be a problem, or customers so that there would be a problem later on with the trust factor? And if not, if they've handled it well, and assuming, as with most companies, it's not a very, very significant issue, then I think that's a reasonably clean bill of health.
I think I've heard you say before there's two types of companies, those that know they've been breached and those that don't know they've been breached.
But everybody fear-mongers in this area, and all the news is not bad, because I have seen many companies that have, when there's tone at the top and good cyber governance, they've driven the kinds of changes that make them quite resilient, so that when we come in and try to do ethical hacking exercises at their request and try to break in, or if we're inside, if we try to escalate our privileges like a corrupt insider might do, we can't make much progress. So it's not like this is some endless pit of money and time and energy. Companies can become resilient in the cyberspace.